Bryony here from Stitched Up, and today I'm going to be bringing you a super simple upcycling project. I'm going to show you how to turn this shirt into this square neck top. It's a really nice, simple project and a really good way to revamp an old shirt that's just sat around not getting any use. The great thing about it is you don't need a gigantic shirt. So let's get to it. Here's what you're going to need for this project, as well as the garment you're working on: some fabric scissors, unpicker, some pins, tailor's chalk or just a normal chalk will do, a tape measure and a ruler, and you're also going to need a sewing machine and an iron. Okay, so first thing to do is just get your shirt on, and with some pins just mark on your shirt the length. So I've put my length to be about here, and I've added a bit extra in case, so I've got a bit of room for error. And then I'm going to mark where I want the top of my top to come to. And I've also marked on the sleeve my sleeve length. So on this shirt we've got this placket here, so I'm going to go above that. So my sleeve's going to probably end up being sort of just above elbow length, so I've marked that as well. Now we're going to get rid of both of our sleeves for now, because we don't need those until a little bit later. So just going to cut right up to that seam allowance. So that's one sleeve gone. So we'll pop the sleeves aside for 1 second because we don't need those right now. And the first thing that we're going to focus on is the bodice, the body part of the top. So when I marked out the length of my top, I put my mark here, which is just a little bit below a button, but obviously we need to factor in where the buttons are, and ideally we'd have a button at the top because that would just stop the top of the top from opening up there. So I'm going to try cutting the top across here. It was a bit higher than I'd originally planned, but I think I'm giving myself a bit extra, about 3 centimetres extra for my seam allowance, because we're going to do a double fold hem. So I'm just going to cut straight across here. So do a line to help you. There we go. So what we're going to do is draw in a line for the sleeve along here. But first of all, it makes sense to try the top on again and just see exactly how wide we want this line to be. So what I'm doing now is just, with the shirt bodice inside out, I'm just pinning it onto myself just to try and get it fitting a bit better. So I've folded over the top by 3 centimetres, which is my hem for the top. And then at this side we're going to, I've folded it down where we're going to have our diagonal line. I'm going to sort of go from my strap here straight down to the side seam. I've also taken some out of the waist, so I've pinned here where I want the waistline to go. And I've also roughly pinned in a couple of darts on the side, so you might not need to do this depending on your shape, but with this one, if I take this one out, you can see that without it, it's kind of like a bit sack-like. But you can kind of see where the fabric, where there's excess, and you can just pinch a little bit out just to get a bit more shaping there. And this is really frustrating and hard to do on yourself, but you just basically have to be patient with it and do your best. If you've got someone that can help you, it will probably just make your life that much easier, or even better if you have a mannequin that's adjusted to your size, but obviously most people don't have that. Pin it in roughly first, and then you can just keep checking in the mirror and seeing, you know, comparing the two sides. What you want is both darts to be starting at a level place and to be finishing at the same place on the side seam as well. So if you pin it in roughly when it's on you, we can take it off and then level everything up once we've got it on the table again. So what I'm going to do now is just cut up the side seams to make it a little bit easier to sew the darts in. So just right on that seam. Then before I totally separate these pieces, I'm just going to mark down where I've, with chalk, roughly marked in where my side seam is going to go. Separate the two pieces, and we're going to sew the bust darts. So these are our two fronts. So just to check that we've got everything level, it's good to do it up. So as you can see, the darts that I've pinned in are not looking symmetrical. So we'll fix that first. So what we'll do is we'll just figure out where we want the darts to go. They're both sort of pointing at this line here. So I'm just going to repin them so that they're a little bit neater. So I've pinned my darts in, and what I've done is just held that piece up against my front just to check that it fits okay. And then we're just going to sew a straight line from there to there, and the same on the other side. I'm just checking that my dart measures 2 centimetres at the end. We want the machine on a straight stitch, so I'll be taking out the pins as I go. So I'm just going to put the needle down so I know what my starting point is, and then do a straight line down here to this point, which is where the dart's going to end. And at the beginning I'm going to do a back tack, which means go forward and reverse on the same spot for a few stitches, and that just stops it from coming undone. And then when I get to this end, I'm just going to come off like that, and I will, giving a few inches of spare thread, so it's like that. I'm just going to tie a knot in the end, and now these threads can be cut, and that's our first dart. Exactly the same thing on the other side. So the next thing that we want to do, with our front piece facing right sides up, we're going to put the back piece on, right side facing down, and then we're going to line them up at the sides. But before we sew it, we'll just try it on just to check that it's all fitting as it should be. But I'm going to pin it. I've got some chalk lines here where I thought my side seam should be. So line it up at the armhole here and roughly try and follow my chalk lines, because that should be just about right. So I'm just going to try it on, and then we'll see how the side seams fit. So I've tried it on, and I've just pinned all the way down, and I've kind of drawn with a chalk line just to smooth out that line, and I've also just made sure on this side that they're both the same, so they both come in about the same from the edge. So now what we're going to do is just do a straight stitch all the way down, and so my top is I wanted it to end around here, so I'm just going to sew a couple of inches beyond that just to give myself some hem allowance there. So when we start at the top here, we'll do a back tack and then straight down and then back tack at the bottom. So I've just had one more try on just to check that it definitely fits, and it's okay. So I'm just going to trim off my seam allowances, I'm going to leave a little bit extra, so I'm probably going to chop them off to about 1.5 centimetres just in case I want to go back and alter it at a later date. And I've also double checked the length, and I think I'm okay with this, so I'm just going to chop off the excess length here. And then we're going to tackle this bit here, the sleeve, where the sleeve joins the bodice and the top hem. So I'm just marking in where I'd folded, and I know it's not exactly symmetrical on both sides, but we'll check that now. So I just chalk in where I'd marked it and then unpin it all. Okay, so my chalk line is there. And we do want to, because this shirt was a little bit discoloured under the arms, which is why we're upcycling it. So we'll probably just take the chalk line just to underneath that arm, just to cut off that discoloured bit there on the seam. So I'll just measure in. So we're going to be 7 centimetres in from the edge on that side. So that's where our sloping line is going to come to, 7. And then we can just draw a line to the side seam. So for this top, we're just going to make the front and back totally symmetrical, so you can just cut through both layers at the same time. However, I'm going to fold in where my seam allowance will be before I cut it. So fold in the top, fold in the bottom so that they're both matching. Make sure all the side seams are all lined up before we do this next bit, because then we're just going to cut through all of the layers to make the bit where our sleeve is going to join. So that is our bodice. The final thing that we're going to do for now with the bodice is just to fold in this seam allowance, like so. And it's good to pin on the side that you're going to sew, because then you can take the pins out as you go. And now we're going to stitch a straight stitch across all of there. So now moving on to the sleeves, I'm just going to cut straight across just above that bracket there, because that's going to be my sleeve length, and the same with the other side. So what we'll do first of all is just zigzag all around this raw edge, just to finish it off and stop it from fraying. And while we're doing that, we can also finish off the side seams in exactly the same way. So with a zigzag stitch, I've just finished these raw edges of the sort of what is the armhole basically. And now we're going to attach the sleeve to that armhole. So we want the right sides to be together. So the shorter length sleeve is the front, that one's the back. So we're going to join the right side of the front to the right side of the bodice. And we're going to start by lining up this centre seam to the centre seam there. Pin them together. And I'm just going to pin the front of the sleeve and bodice. Not going to do the back for now. And if you wanted, because we're joining a slight curve to a straight line here, so don't worry about these raw edges lining up exactly. We could have straightened them off, but it wasn't that different, so I just didn't bother. So just pin that in place, and then what we're going to do is start sewing here. I'm going to sew all the way down, and then we'll move this around so that we can stitch all the way in one operation to the back there. So for now, just pin that sleeve front, pin the other sleeve front to the other front armhole, and then we'll go to the sewing machine. Don't forget to back tack at the beginning and the end. So then when you get to the centre seam, if you make sure the needle is in the machine, then you can lift up the presser foot, and then you can swivel the fabric around, and you just have to kind of rearrange this sleeve a little bit and line up those raw edges again. Okay, so I've tried the top on just to see how it's all looking, and I wasn't exactly sure what to do with the sleeves, which is why I've left this bit until last. But having tried it on, I think I'm just going to hem this So I'm gonna fold it over by 1 centimetre, stitch it all the way around like that, and the same for that side. And then I'm happy with the length, I'm happy with the sleeves, so I'm just gonna finish both the top and the bottom with a double fold hem, and again stitch it all the way around with a straight stitch, and then we're done. So here it is, our finished top. I think you could do this in about a couple of hours. Nice, quick, easy upcycle project to revamp an old shirt.